Premier League's back. Chelsea heading to Leicester City. Always a tough game against Leicester. You know, not started this season great, but they are a team that can pick up a result. Obviously, beating us in the FA Cup final, unfortunately, last season. And also, this game ultimately ended up being Frank Lampard's last game in charge as a Chelsea manager when we lost 2-0 there last season. What are you expecting this time round? Saturday lunchtime. Obviously, lunchtime kickoff after the international break, never ideal with players coming back late. How do you see this game going?
I think you've always got to expect a difficult game at Leicester, given the talent they have. I mean, I do know they're without Yuri Tielemans, who obviously scored in the FA Cup final and is always a dangerous player. He kind of, a bit like whether you'd say N'Golo Kante or sort of Mason Mount for us, he's kind of that link player. He's someone that you feel has to play for Leicester to play well. You know, I'm saying that now, Leicester will probably turn up and beat us on Saturday, but I am cautious about it because it is that 12:30 kickoff. Tuchel was just awarded Manager of the Month, which is always a curse if you're going into the next game. So there are some warning signs there. You know, having an away game, this like early away game at a tough ground post the international break is probably not the ideal situation for Tuchel. I'm sure he would have probably wanted it the other way around, where we had Burnley at home and then Leicester away before the international break, if you know what I mean. Like, I think maybe there'll be some awkwardness there. But, you know, Leicester haven't really started the season that well. I mean, I watched their game against Arsenal and, you know, Arsenal took them apart. You know, they really did. I know that Ramsdale made a few brilliant saves, but defensively, I thought they were really exposed. And I do wonder if that FA Cup final was a real turning point maybe for Tuchel, in terms of, it's not like he was doing anything bad at that point from Chelsea. You know, he'd gotten us to the Champions League final, I think, by that point when we faced him in the FA Cup final. But just I thought tactically, or at least personnel-wise, he made a few mistakes that day, you know, starting Alonso over Chilwell, maybe just that feeling of, you know, Chelsea being a little bit turgid and maybe not having the right mentality going into that game. I'm intrigued to see what he does against Leicester on this Saturday, because Chelsea haven't won there in the league since 2017, I think, under Conte, when Morata scored. So that's how long ago it was. I'm intrigued to see as well how he fields the attack, because Lukaku, I'm not quite sure if he's ready to start. I mean, I've seen some pictures of him training with the ball now, but it looks like he's still training alone, which is always kind of a sign. I mean, we're recording this on Wednesday evening, and I'm not quite sure if he'll be fully ready to start that game. He may be on the bench. He may not even be fully available for the squad. So we'll have to see on that. But there are certain players I want to see start this game. Like, I think have to keep on starting Callum Hudson-Odoi, who's been brilliant. I think, especially at left wing, I want to see him at left wing again. Creatively, I just think having that consistency is so important for Callum. And I don't think he could have performed any better in the previous run, to be honest. I think Tuchel gave him that opportunity. You can kind of go, oh, injuries allowed the space for Callum to get that chance finally. But given some of the other players who've been in that position, I think Callum's consistency and the things that he showed, albeit against poor opposition at times, I think is enough for me to want to see Callum stay in that starting 11. Reece James, I think, is the other interesting one for me, because tactically against Leicester last season, Reece was used as a right centre-back to kind of deal with Jamie Vardy's pace. And I'm intrigued to see what Tuchel does. And I actually hope Tuchel doesn't do that again, because Reece is just in the form of his life at the moment. Creatively, he's been incredible this season. And the wing backs, both him and Chilwell, are just so essential to the way Chelsea create chances and the way Chelsea flow as a team. So I really hope that Tuchel doesn't think to himself, yeah, sure, we've got maybe concerns about the pacing behind, but I look at someone like Trevor Chalobah, for instance, who's got more than enough speed, I think, to cope. And that defense is so rigid. So there are intriguing things for Tuchel to do tactically. But it seems like, fingers crossed, we have a clean bill of health going into this game mostly. There's some players who, of course, need to get back to fitness. I'm not quite sure about Werner, because he's not been training, apparently. He's still not at Cobham. So there are some question marks over there. But I feel we should, like, the performance against Burnley, it's always hard to know, because an international break obviously disrupts that rhythm. But the performance against Burnley, I think, was really good. I think it was one of Chelsea's best creative performances of the season. The problem was Chelsea just couldn't finish that day. But I feel Tuchel's sort of feelings after it were pretty good, actually, in terms of sort of reflecting on the performance and saying, actually, we played well. The stats show we were creative. So you hope that Chelsea can continue that momentum against Leicester. So it's going to be a tough game. You've got to expect it against Leicester. But I feel like there are areas for Chelsea to exploit. And I actually feel like a team like Leicester, who want a lot more of the ball and may actually come onto Chelsea a bit more, always is going to help Tuchel, because I think he loves to use this Chelsea team to play on transition and play on counter-attack, and I think that's where Chelsea can thrive on Saturday.
Yeah, I think there's, as mentioned, it's nice to have a lot of selection, kind of not headaches as such, but selection issues perhaps. I don't think we've had that for a long time. And one of the best things about Tuchel, I think, since she's come in, is the fact that it doesn't matter who seems to play, the performance levels are always so high. So you don't have to worry about someone stepping into the back line, because we always seem to keep a clean sheet or give up very few chances, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, then we're going to probably presume that Lukaku isn't going to be fit to start. Presuming that, who do you feel should spearhead the attack? Are we thinking Kai Havertz in that kind of centre forward position? Callum Hudson-Odoi, I agree with you, should continue. Obviously created the most chances for Chelsea in the Premier League. I think 19 opportunities. If our finishing was better, he could have had 2 or 3 more assists to his name. And perhaps, I don't know how fit Mount's going to be. Obviously he's back in training, not sure. But maybe the likes of Christian Pulisic. There's a few. I mean, what makeup of front three would you go with?
I'd probably stick with Callum, Kai, and I'd bring Mason back in. Kind of a little bit harsh on Barkley, because I thought Barkley had a really good showing against Burnley. He kind of played as a number 10 rather than as kind of a right winger, which you'd expect, or a right number 10. It was interesting to see how Tuchel manage that front three in terms of, as I say, Barkley playing a little bit deeper and kind of having Kai and Cho as a fluid front two. I think that worked against Burnley's deep defense to try and, open up space. Kai's, despite his overall performances not being great, albeit, he is scoring goals. You look at his recent games, he scored against Malmo, he scored against Southampton in the League Cup. He scored against Burnley, and he scored for Germany the other night. A really good finish, a really good low cross. It was kind of a move that you'd expect Chelsea to actually create with the wing backs. The way Hansi Flick has set up his Germany team is not that dissimilar to the way Chelsea play. Hoffman on the overlap, get a really good drilled cross into the box, and Kai running across, dinked it into the bottom corner. Really good finish. So he's in good goal scoring form, and if he's in full fitness, I actually expect Kai to start here. I'd probably go with that front three, because Mason, obviously there are doubts because he didn't play that much against Burnley. He didn't obviously feature for England over the international break, but I suspect that he's probably ready to feature in this game. And you want those connections, I think, are so important for the team right now. As you just mentioned about sort of the rotations, but it within personnel. But I do think there are consistent things you want to see in the team, building up that rhythm when you can. And the way Mason and James on that right side, I think, link up so well together. Callum and Chilwell, I think that's a really good combo that I've seen since the Southampton game, really, in October at the Bridge. Those two, I think, on the left can cause so much harm in the way they can move about. Callum will go out wide, and we know the wing backs like to come inside a lot of the time. So that's the front three I'd go for. It's a very fluid front three. I think it allows Chelsea to sit back a bit more, there's more pressing in that front three, I think you'd say, against Leicester. So that's on instinct the one I'd go for. I'm intrigued because, Hakim Ziyech obviously hasn't been involved for Morocco since he fell out with the national team coach. So I'm interested to see if he'd be one of those players who'd be in the eye of Tuchel for the international break, same as Ross Barkley. Players who you expect to fully fit, ready to go, have no sort of like chinks in the armor in terms of their fitness. So potentially you mentioned Pulisic, obviously scored for the USA. I want to see, I wrote about this for Football London, I want to see Pulisic used as a super sub.
Yeah.
I feel like kind of to couple together why I think he's always been just a devastating player off the bench, just in terms of how he's consistently changed games, but also just maintaining his fitness, because the worst thing we want to see is rush him into a game against Leicester and he has a fitness setback, and that's going to make him potentially miss large chunks of the festive period, where not only do we need numbers, it's for him more games missed. So I feel like as a sub, I think he can be a really devastating weapon for Thomas Tuchel over the next few weeks, because he's continually proved that he can be that. I think he spots his anticipation in the box, I think, is so crucial, and especially against a tiring defense, I think he can be such a horrible player for defenses to cope with later on in the game if Chelsea need a goal, or just if you want to vary that attack up. So that's my front three, and I feel that there are players obviously Tuchel can call from off the bench if he needs to.
Yeah, I say like so many options in that front three and so many options from the bench that can cause problems later on against tiring defences. Leicester defensively this season for Fana has been a massive miss for them. They haven't looked as solid as they usually do, kind of chopping and changing between a 3 and a 4, trying to find something with the personnel he's got available. So there's definitely something to exploit there for our attacking players. Just last thing on the game, obviously in midfield, Loftus-Cheek, we touched on him a little bit earlier. I think he's really been outstanding since he's kind of found his way back into the side. I think every time he's played, really, he's been exceptional. Whether he's been part of a 3 in the middle or a 2 in the middle, he's done really well. Obviously, no international football for him this break, so he's had a lot of time to work on the training pitch, etc. Do you feel this could be a game that we see him from the off, given that Kovacic probably isn't going to be fit, and you're left with Kante and Jorginho?
I would like to see Ruben play because it's just, the comments from Tuchel after that Malmo game, which is the last game he started, where he was like, he's really bigging him up. He was saying, Ruben is too talented, and then he's on the bench the next game. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that was a wrong decision, actually, because you can kind of in hindsight go, when Ruben came off the bench, Chelsea's attack didn't look as good as when, he wasn't on the pitch. So that's a difficult thing for Tuchel to manage. But I would say that, against a team like Leicester, who obviously have quite a few internationals themselves who've been out and about over this break, Kante and Loftus-Cheek, I think, is a really interesting double six to me in terms of the mobility both have, the way Ruben's really settled this season, and I think has proven a lot of people wrong. Even myself, I've been a massive Ruben fan since his earliest days, and I just wanted to see him succeed. When he got that injury, it just felt like such a big knock to him, and seeing him at Fulham last year, not really setting the world alight. But I think in retrospect, that loan was simply about getting fitness and simply about having a season where you're just fit and you're playing and you're getting minutes at the top flight again, even if you're in a team that gets relegated and you're not always playing in your favorite position. I think that was so big for Ruben to get through a full season. I think mentally, as he said recently, that's been so big. He feels so much more confident inside his own body again. He's not kind of scared when he's making, quick turns on the pitch, especially with the injury he had that was so devastating to him. And you just see the quality he offers, the way he can do things on the pitch that are he just is a complete different type of midfielder that Chelsea don't have. Not only I think aesthetically, but I think in terms of the dynamic he has of being so physically dominant, but also having the feet of like a winger. I at times watching Ruben, it's weird because I know that pundits like Rio Ferdinand have sort of compared him to Yaya Toure. I understand that, obviously, when he's, driving forward, shrugging people off his frame. But, his quick trickery is, like, as I say, something I'd expect Eden Hazard to have, really a smaller player. And that's what makes him such a great player to watch. So I'd like to see him start because I think he's fresh and I think he deserves minutes. And Chelsea are going to be playing a lot of football, only a couple of days after Leicester, a massive Champions League game at home to Juventus. And that's where Jorginho, I think, comes into effect, because European football, I just think, suits Jorginho naturally a lot better at anyway. I think that's the kind of game where you expect Jorginho and Kante to be the double six. But I feel like Ruben deserves a chance in what would be a higher profile Premier League game, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's the next kind of step in his development under Tuchel, is to earn that trust to start in your big games. And this is a massive away game. I think he's definitely done enough to warrant starting there, and he can definitely do a job. And, he's someone that is so different to anyone else you've got in that position. His physicality, his touch on the ball, his range of passing, the fact that he's always forward thinking and he picks up the ball and drives forward with it. Not the other guys are top players, but they don't offer that in midfield. They offer something different. So it's refreshing to see someone whose first instinct is to pick the ball up and to look forward, rather than to slow the game down and just play like a simple sideways pass like a Jorginho might do. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I think it's important if we can win this game. It'll be a big statement of intent that we actually are serious contenders this season. Come back after an international break, early kickoff, tough away game. I think if we can win this, because it's a big week, got Leicester away, then he's touched on Juventus in midweek, followed by obviously a struggling Manchester United the following weekend. If we can get through this week without losing, then I think it bodes well heading into that Christmas period. But yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting game for sure.